thought today that I'd read a piece of one of my adult novels, unpublished as yet, I'm afraid. And it's been roughly based on the life of my grandmother, who was born in the 1870s and died in the 1970s. And thus she lived through the Rising and the War of Independence, the Civil War, and the crash of 1929. In this little piece, I'm dealing with her sister, and the piece, I think, describes the sister very well. And Josie was indeed full of fun. She was a mischievous child with a fondness for playing practical jokes, but her family stopped short of scolding her because there wasn't a trace of badness in her. In fact, they were in awe of her. Tall and possessing a natural grace, the beautiful Josie would enter a room with regal dignity, and for an instant everyone would stop whatever they were doing to admire her. Everyone agreed that she and the dashing, handsome Jimmy were an ideal match. Living in Dublin after we were married was sheer heaven. The shops, the fashionable crowds, the dresses, the parties and the theatres, and more lovely dresses. Often of an evening she and Jimmy would take the tram into town to watch the spectacle of guests attending a vice-regal ball in Dublin Castle. The queue of carriages stretched down the length of Dame Street to Trinity College, and as each carriage crept by, she craned her neck to catch glimpses of jewels sparkling in the light thrown by the gas lamps. From illustrations in the magazines, Josie could well imagine how elegant it must have been inside the castle, with banks upon banks of flowers and gorgeous gowns and colourful uniforms and glorious music. The pomp and magic of the vice-regal court ended, however, on Easter Monday, 1916. "What do you intend doing today, dear?" Josie asked her husband over breakfast that morning. "Have lunch with some of the lads, and you?" "It's such a lovely day, I think I'll take the tram to Kingstown and stroll down the pier. I'm bound to meet someone I know. We can have afternoon tea in the Royal Marine. I'll drink a glass of port in your honour, shall I, love?" Port was their code for an hour or two of unbridled sex. "I'll make sure I'm home by 4 then. We're not due at the Gallaters until 7. Josie thought she heard the sound of distant gunfire while walking to the tram stop, and put it to the back of her mind as she rushed to catch an approaching tram. Kingston that day has its normal complement of bank holiday visitors. There was a regal atmosphere in Kingstown. The women were fashionably attired in the latest style of mid-calf dresses, the men in smart suits or blazers, topped with bowler hats, nannies pushing perambulators with well-behaved children in tow, following in their wake, their laughter and conversation reserved as befitting the well-to-do. Josie was pleased with the admiring glances she was attracting. She was glad now that she had chosen the aquamarine dress with the braided hussar-style bodice and wide skirt that floated around her slim ankles in the gentle breeze, drawing attention to her slender ankles, encased in grey silk stockings with matching shoes. Her grey upturned hat completed the ensemble. Her pleasure evaporated into thin air, however, at the sight of her neighbour, Mrs. Murphy, approaching along the pier with unladylike speed. There was no way escaping. "Good morning, Mrs. Murphy," Josie said with feigned brightness. "Mrs. Lynch," Mrs. Murphy seized Josie's gloved hand in a vice-like grip. "Isn't the news tremendously exciting?" The feather on her hat was all a quiver. "What news?" Josie asked, quickly retrieving her hand. "The fighting in the city." "Fighting? The city's ablaze. All the army garrisons have been captured. The freedom from the British at last." "An exaggeration, surely," Josie said dismissively. Mrs. Murphy was one of those busybodies who thought she knew everything, and was forever coming out with heavily embroidered bits of gossip, the product of her lively imagination. Far from it. The pier is abuzz with the news. Her polished accent dropped a notch, as it always did when she was excited. "It's a full-scale rising." "A rising when Irishmen and Englishmen are fighting side by side against the Germans in Flanders," mocked Josie. "It's a full-time rising, I tell you. Rusing. Rumours, Mrs. Murphy, rusing. Rumours, sorry for that. Rumours, Mrs. Murphy, rumours. Tell me now, how are your boys getting on? Josie asked as sweetly as she dared before Mrs. Murphy had a chance to get another word in. Oh, very well, Mrs. Murphy beamed smugly. Very well indeed. They're at school in England, you know. The schools there are so much better than here, and they'll make influential friends there too. So good for their future, don't you think? And now that's all I'm going to read for today. Watch again if you're interested.